welcome to Dead Man Talking. Very, very excited, guys, to bring this story to the channel. I actually slept on it for the last 2 months when it first came out. The title threw me, and it's not something I've ever covered before on the channel. Of course, please do let me know what you think down below. I know you guys are going to enjoy this. As ever, please do like and share. Big thank you to the author Voidbearer2kn17 for such an amazing and complex piece of work. Without further ado, in the series entitled I Am a Deep Web Archivist. Let's get straight into that. My name, at this juncture, is unimportant. I will likely reveal it at a later time, but for the meantime, John Smith will be a suitable alias. Before I reveal to you some of the files I have archived, I will need to explain to you a bit more about myself and why I'm doing this. Hopefully this will grant you a bit better insight into myself. I am, for lack of better words, a sociopath, but unlike the ones with poor impulse control and self-destructive behaviour, I have ingrained into me at a young age proper life skills by my father, after he caught me standing over the 4th cat I had killed. It was not out of malice, I doubt it was even curiosity, and I'm not trying to make an awful pun, I just did it. He demanded to know the reason for my actions, and I explained that the cats had started to follow me, and I found it annoying. When I asked if I had done anything wrong, there was shock in his eyes, as I have later come to realise. He explained to me that the cats I had killed were beloved pets of another family who want to know where they are. I didn't understand why this was so important, but his urgency in his voice made the impression that while I may not have cared, other people would. "Are they going to throw me in jail?" I asked. He looked at me for a moment. "No, John, I won't, but I need to understand why you act this way, and I will teach you how to blend in with the rest of the world. Your actions could have dire consequences for your life if you do not maintain control, so I will teach you. It will be difficult, but the lessons are valuable." In short, he trained me like I was an army private. Strict timetable, strict punishments, constant drills into theoretical situations, but he was never aggressive. There were times when I could see the predatory mindset he might not have been aware of would try to push through, but he kept it in check. Being on a military base most of my life, the discipline was familiar. Eventually, I would join the army, and I did fairly well. While I did not understand why others did, I was aware that they would have motivations. The rest of my life was, I believe, mundane. Nothing of significance really appears to mind, but then again, it's not like I have a good point of comparison. It was 8 years into my service. I was acknowledged as a capable soldier who was dependable. One night, during a night exercise in a country that I cannot speak of due to certain laws, my unit was performing reconnaissance. A potential intruder was sighted, and we were to verify the identity. 6 soldiers walked into the forest that night. Only I walked out. It is the only true definitive point in my recent years. Deep into the forest, we were in standard search formation. Jacobs heard a crack of wood breaking and signalled us to halt. As our eyes swept around to locate the source, a Russian being charged into outline and took hill. The scream was shortened by a loud crack. His neck was broken. Tommy went to investigate, but was dragged into the woods before anyone could countermand his actions. "Open fire!" I said softly. "Negative. Our people might still be in there." Knives were drawn, and by that time, another soldier was dragged screaming into the woods. 3 soldiers left, and the discipline was diminishing. "Fuck it," grumbled Erickson behind me. As soon as the movement was heard, Erickson fired. We watched as the bullets hit the creature, but no wounds were visible. This tall, lanky creature slammed its fist onto Erickson's head with a crunch noise that I cannot describe. I was grabbed and thrown to the side. My head smacked into a tree, and I was dazed. I could barely hear gunfire and growls that sounded more than bestial, if that makes sense. Shaking my head, I pushed myself upright. The gun was useless. And this being was far too quick and strong to be human, but did not match any known animal I'm aware of at that point in time. Rustling could be heard around me for 3 very tense minutes. They seemed to lead deeper into the woods. I was prepping to head in to verify the status of my men, when I felt it stand behind me.
Empty,
It said. This pale creature looking into me with presumable sunken eyes revealing what looked like black eyes. The image of a piece of meat at a butcher's dangling by one of those large hooks immediately popped into mind.
empty.
It repeated. Then it turned around and slipped away. I couldn't move or act. Distant noises indicated it was walking away, but the pace seemed more deliberate, like it was dragging my men. I left the forest heading back to base, and after intense debriefing and threats of court-martial, I was allowed to remain an active soldier while undergoing therapy. Mental breakdown was the official diagnosis, while that unit was deemed MIA. They sent out 4 units to locate my old unit. 3 people returned. Husks of who they once were. When I got the chance to lock eyes, we nodded once. We knew. After my service, I left and decided to further investigate the cryptid phenomenon. During this time, I would find the entity that killed my unit and several other soldiers, the Wendigo. My theory about the Wendigo hunger isn't that it seeks human meat to survive, but humanity. The human soul is what it seeks. Knowing it lost it when it consumed human flesh, it considers that it might regain it in the same way, not realising it is the act itself that will doom it to remain a Wendigo. No longer an active soldier, I researched the cryptids, but I went further than most enthusiasts. I spoke with another soldier, who asked to remain nameless, about the deep web, and the best way to browse it. He explained to me the nature of some of the sites in the dark web, but I explained that I wasn't seeking that, but the back channels, the deep web. He gave me a copy of his custom browser, which I dubbed The Fly, because it was small and looked seemingly inconsequential. It could flit past the red rooms and the like to go deep. He explained the setup, and I thanked him. After setup, I went into the dark side of the internet. I was testing the program out, and it worked perfectly. A few red rooms were displaying their entertainment, and I was able to slip past most of the admins. One was particularly aggressive in his actions, but the setup for this program made IP tracing a pointless endeavour. I don't fully understand the complexities, but I know that person, and I trust their work. So, I plunged into the depths of the deep web, seeking government declassified documents and the like, and stumbled across a forum of coroners. Unlike other coroners, they didn't deal with murder, suicide or mundane mysteries. Their victims all were cryptid or supernaturally related. I mentioned my interest in their jobs and explained I sought answers. The users were not happy with my presence, but when I explained my encounter with the Wendigo, they actually recognised me. Apparently, certain reports from psychiatrists can make it to them if certain words are used. The doctor did not suspect subterfuge. They offered a deal. I archived some of their cases, and I would learn about what happened to my unit. They didn't seem to have a problem if I was to release most of the details to the public, but they warned that most people would not accept the surreality of the world. But if I could garner some interest, they would allow it, as long as personal details were omitted. I would come to understand why later on. But I agreed.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 1.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for the interest in my new vocation. As you can imagine, the case that I chose to disclose my first was the one I was personally involved in. I was not quite aware of the implications that would be brought to light in doing this. However, having spoken with some of the Morticians in the forum page, they asked that any name is to be withheld, locations were to be generalised, and make sure no government agency was aware of my action. I agreed, and they showed me the case on my unit.
Case file. Wendigo Milvet. Number 0261.
After consolidating the reports with the lone survivor of the event, and the autopsies of the recovered military personnel bodies, The following is a fairly accurate recollection of the events. At 0116, the Mill unit was sent to investigate the reports of an intruder. This was a training exercise to judge the capabilities of lone survivor as a team leader. Approximately at 0139, the Mill unit had an auditory reconnaissance of Wendigo number 0183. Estimated identity of Cryptid is John Sampson, a hunter who went missing around 1703. Recovered body, Private Jacobs reported a branch snapping. The Mill unit halted and tried to locate the source of the sound. Around 0140, Wendigo number 0183 charged the unit and snatched Private Second Class Hill, snapping his neck. Private P. Tommy went to investigate but was grabbed by the claws of the Wendigo 0183 and his throat was slashed. Specialist Jameson was dragged under another bush. Claw marks indicate his death was slower as the lungs were punctured multiple times. Private Second Class Erickson was able to shoot Wendigo 0183 when it charged the group again. As multiple previous cases have established, standard ammunition fails to leave the true impact on the body of the Wendigo. Further evidence that older Wendigos are virtually immune to small arms fire. Erickson was killed immediately when his skull was impacted from the top, severely misaligning two vertebrae, severing the spinal cord and crushing the throat vertically. Lone survivor was knocked aside. Estimate time duration for encounter with Wendigo 0183 is 3 minutes. Acting Corporal Jenkins' body was never recovered. On special note in this case is that this is one of his first times that the cryptid in question spoke in response to the presence of the survivor. The word empty is confusing, as Wendigo are traditionally voracious in their pursuit of human flesh. Autopsy summary of Erickson, Jacobs, P. Tommy and Jameson. Erickson, fractured skull from overhead strike from Cryptid, catastrophic damage to the neck and throat area due to the force of the impact. Severing of the spinal cord implies death was instantaneous. Jacobs, multiple stab wounds from the claws of the Cryptid. Secondary infection was not able to infect the body. Body was still cremated as per protocol, as was P. Tommy. P. Tommy, throat slashed by the claws of the Cryptid. Note, this is the same P. Tommy who witnessed the encounter of the police officer who encountered Skinwalker, Michigan, Sub-Territory Number 4. Said police officer also reported on the mush corpse in the vehicle. The two deceased military personnel names Hill and Jenkins were not recovered, likely taken as food by Wendigo 0183. Judging by the enforced counselling sessions for the survivor, it seems unlikely he willingly caused the incident. Reading over the case file, I tried to figure out the implications of the things that had caught my attention. Had these people really figured out who the Wendigo was, or was it just guesswork? Had there been enough encounters for the filing system to be displayed in the way that you saw it? I was aware P. Tommy was given the choice of enlistment or prison. It makes me wonder if the incident they refer to was the same case that caused him to make that decision. Why are skinwalkers designated by territories? Could it be that, given their ability to shapeshift, make it impossible to identify who they originally were? The mush corpse is not a reference I'm familiar with. While I could imagine why it was called that way, the term mush seems overkill. But given the wealth of resources I have access to, I chose to see what these Morticians and their network have concluded regarding Wendigo. Wendigo, humanoid cryptid. While we have been unable to locate the first known Wendigo, we have concluded the original story of these beings is more fact than fiction. Wendigos are humans who, after prolonged starvation, consume human flesh, and in the process are cursed by something which causes the transformation. The transformation is an approximate growth of limbs by 22%, and the fingernails elongate, sharpen and harden to assist in catching more humans to consume. Why the Wendigo feel the need to consume human flesh is not readily apparent. It is speculated that it is the only meat that satiates their never-ending hunger. After consuming human flesh of a significant quality, older Wendigo requiring more, they return to a place of significance for them to hibernate for years. Fire seems to be a bane to these creatures, as it makes holding of the younger ones a more viable tactic. However, Wendigo who are over 2 centuries old, seem to ignore the heat of the flames and ignore it as a stalling tactic. Weaponising it against Wendigo is a far superior option. However, most people, when facing cryptids, seem to leave their rational minds behind as they see something truly abhorrent to them and seldom to take the time to mull through the problem. Given that Wendigo gain in strength and speed, it is understood why humans rarely have the time to plan. Cases involving firearms were conflicting until it was deduced that younger Wendigo were vulnerable to small arms fire, until their body matured to resist calibers smaller than a .22. Very few encounters have involved active military personnel, so judging that firepower is difficult unless more encounters were had. Knives are an effective, if foolish idea for Wendigos who are less than a century old. Their behaviour indicates that they shun civilization. Reasons why are speculative. The information was illuminating. Hopefully this will be a benefit to you all. If there are any other cryptids that you wish to know about, or unusual deaths, please let me know and I will try to locate the appropriate case file.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 2.
There were a few more votes for a Dogman case, so I have found one that hopes strikes something within you. This one is fairly recent, from what I can tell. There is some footage from fairly early commercially available nanny cam footage as well, but I have been asked not to upload that due to the hidden surveillance encryption which allows the alphabet agencies access at their discretion.
Case file. Dogman Civilian. Number 0819.
Initial victim is an autistic male of 9 years old. Severe anxiety around strangers. Communicative abilities restricted to barely legible writing in a large diary. Secondary victim is the child's mother. Father's whereabouts unknown. Not important to this case. 3 weeks prior to the incident, she purchased an emotional support animal to see if it would alleviate her child's anxiety issues. Location is a lifestyle block in the state of Montana. The land is family owned and was seldom in use. Financial information was further obtained in the process of our investigations into the event and deemed inconsequential, but recorded for the sake of necessity. The initial victim was content to be left alone, but according to the counselling adhered by the mother, she felt this would hamper the social development of the child. Records from these counselling sessions indicated that the counsellor would explain that due to the levels of anxiety the child exhibits in social situations, there would be little chance for future development. The counsellor did gently coax the mother into acquiring an emotional support animal that the child might feel bonded to. Given the location where they lived, a dog was suggested. According to the audio from the nannycam footage, the bonding process was a success, with the initial victim showing some self-confidence, even looking his mother directly in the eyes. The dog was well trained and didn't react to the extreme emotions exhibited in the lounge area. 3 weeks later, the mother could be seen running into the lounge. The time was quite late judging by the lack of light outside the windows. Blood could be seen on her clothing. Judging by her wails and screams, the child was dead, mauled by some animal. Clutched tightly in her hand is the cordless phone for the house. While the phone line was disconnected, the microphone still worked and the hard drive in the base was still recording. The mother was aware that the phone lines weren't working and she could hear scraping movements upstairs. This was confirmed via the recording acquired. She was then seen rushing to a window and she looked out in shock. After significant alterations of the video recording, a lupine humanoid cryptid, known commonly as a dogman, was seen skulking at the edge of the camera range. Presumably seeing this, the mother backed away and turned as a canine head peered around the corner. Nearly hitting its head on the doorframe indicated that this was not of standard height of any known dog breeds. It stalked into the front room on its hind legs. The coloration looks like the emotional support animal previously mentioned. Parts of the fur seemed matted down, likely with blood. A third dogman also entered, but was on all fours. Judging by their gait, it seemed unsure of its pace. This could be attributed to the polished wooden floor. The secondary victim was frozen in fear when she saw the two cryptids. The attack was swift and coordinated. The one on all fours went low while the standard one went high. Her death was quick. The third one joined the other two for the meal. After the standing one unlocked the door, they then walked to the door, opened it, and then bounded off into the night. Police investigation came as part of an initial missing persons report after the mother hadn't called her family. Police found the bodies and they opened a homicide investigation. The case remains open. The bodies were diverted from the regular coroners to ones affiliated with this forum. Autopsy. Initial victim. Multiple bite marks to the arms and stomach area, scratch marks from a large paw, evidence on the limbs, microtumours located within the brain which could indicate the autism and social anxiety problems. Secondary victim. Bite wound on the ankle, severing the Achilles tendon, single bite mark to the throat, evidence that the stomach area was gorged. Missing organs include ovaries, kidneys, uterus, stomach, pancreas, liver, and 95% of the intestine. Secondary investigation. Our primary one. Scouring the nanny cam footage shows in the weeks leading up to the attack, movement could be seen during the day of the emotional support animal. No anomalous movement detected. 5 days after the bonding, a dogman cryptid could be seen creeping up to the house. The emotional support animal stood up and walked over to the wall opposite of where the dogman crawled to. The ESA stood there for several minutes until the dogman cryptid crept away. The initial victim just watched his ESA stood at the wall, while the initial victim is normally next to the ESA at all times, even during sleep. The movement at the edge of the nanny cam view resumed until the night of the attack. Movement in the peripheral showed 2 dogmen approach the house. One skulked at the edge of the light on all fours, while the other ran to the side. Screams could be heard from a location suspected to be the child's bedroom. Soon, the mother could be seen entering the lounge in the states previously described. Several journals were taken as evidence in the initial investigation. Upon discovery of the contents within, they were switched with duplicates, with explicit mentions of dogs being removed. The mother was made note of several minor incidents where her child would stand at the window and look into the forest. When she asked if he would like to go for a walk in there, he refused violently. As soon as she mentioned that they wouldn't walk there, the child immediately stopped and hugged his mother. Judging by the descriptions in the following instance, it appears to be the same location that ESA would stand when the dogman approached. The mother advised, while she did some basic yard work, that she always felt trepidation when she looked to the forest area, like there was someone watching her. She tried to muster the courage to go look for herself, but didn't want to risk leaving her child alone. The journals of the boy seemed nonsensical, but after multiple encounters with children on this spectrum, certain clues were common among all of them. These journals were unable to get upgraded in their standards of language. The initial victim was aware of the cryptid's presence. When he would see the dogman standing outside his window, he would scream for his mother, cause the cryptid to flee. This happened for about 2 years. One day, while he was walking around the backyard, within view of his mother, he felt the dogman approach. Its claws snagged his shorts and started to drag him away, but his mother fortunately spotted her child disappear from view. When she approached, the dogman ran, leaving the child behind. What people would find most chilling is that the day the ESA stood near the cryptid was referenced in the book of the initial victim. Doggy was wrong. Looked like doggy, but not doggy. Ma not no doggy wrong. Doggy looks at me like the bad thing at times. It is surmised that the ESA was turned into a dogman through unknown means, as 3 dogmen were seen running from the house. The ESA dogman was able to use his paw to turn the lock by hooking the key in between his toes. The handle was easier to manage. Details on the cryptid. Dogman. Dogman is of common cryptid type, the anthropomorphic animal. While it doesn't have full human features, it is able to walk on hind legs for extended periods of time and displays near human intelligence. Significantly weaker than the more supernatural Wendigo or Skinwalker, regularly available firearms are enough to kill a dogman. Reports indicate that upon death, dogman revert to their more basic canine form.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 3.
As previously mentioned, there have been requests for a case including the cryptid known collectively as Bigfoot. This is an unusual cryptid. in which the incidents involving are often just sightings of something big in the woods. But there have been journals from long-term hikers and campers who have had prolonged encounters with these cryptids. There is also one autopsy for a Bigfoot. The mortician who conducted that autopsy was inconsolable for months afterwards. He has recently returned to work. He has also requested counselling until further notice.
Case file. Bigfoot, civilian. Number 011.
A weathered-looking journal was found on a picnic table in a large national park. For obvious reasons, the exact location will not be included. Park ranger retrieved the journal, and after trying to find out the identity of the owner, the subsequent report made it to us, where we retrieved the journal and spoke with the park ranger. The park ranger agreed not to mention anything about this journal. The camper who wrote this journal had gone on a rediscovery adventure. They stated how they hadn't been connected to the outdoors for a period of 8 years and greatly missed the tranquility. Having gone on a sabbatical, they did the appropriate level of research for the area they were going to, had gotten equipment to replace old gear. They did some training to keep fit for the long hikes, spoke with park rangers and left. The details were removed from the relevant databases. The beginning of the journal is a descriptive journey, making mapping the beginning quite easy. 2 weeks in is the first indication that there was something preternatural afoot. The sense of being watched and the occasional muffled snap of a branch being broken. This went on for around 6 days. The person did not indicate any trepidation regarding these events. A couple of days after the sense of being watched stopped, the camper detailed an encounter with 2 very gruff-looking men. They had almost feral look in their eyes, and their presence was intensely unsettling. The communication was rough, almost punctuated with growls. Their leering gaze made the camper very uncomfortable. As they took one step closer, they both stopped simultaneously. They looked around, like kids caught with their hands in a cookie jar. A gasp escaped their lips, and they bolted away. It wouldn't be until later that the camper would recognise the look and behaviour. It was that of the startled prey. The writing is in cursive, and had been fluent throughout the journal so far. The night after that encounter, the camper noted that instead of feeling refreshed like they normally had since their excursion, they felt mentally exhausted. Careful examination noted that the cursive was not as flowing. For the next week, the fluency of the cursive writing was deteriorating, and block lettering was being used in place of it. Repeated mention of a recurring dream. The camper describes the ineffable urge to stand in the middle of a clearing next to a large silhouette of a humanoid. The dream would just consist of the 2 of them standing there for hours on end. After the aforementioned week, the camper detailed the first proper encounter with a Bigfoot, or to be more precise, the Bigfoot from the dream. Exiting their tent to cook an evening meal, the camper noticed the presence immediately. A large humanoid, approximately 9 feet tall, stood half hidden behind a tree at the edge of the small clearing the camper was camped in. Instead of fear, the camper felt a sense of serenity. The camper nodded to the Bigfoot and then cooked their meal. The camper had trouble putting into words what happened next, because while he did engage in a form of communication, due to the nature of how the conversation took place, putting it into words seemed difficult, as 5 pages were filled with writing which was crossed out on multiple occasions. From what could be ascertained, the Bigfoot would telepathically impart the concept of something into the camper's mind. For this instance, it was the concept of cooking food, not the description of it, but the concept. It seemed a little hazy, as if unsure. The camper went and tried to explain vocally about the process of cooking one's food, but the Bigfoot reinforced the idea, and instead of cooking, the focus was on the process of cooking. It took a while, but it seemed that the Bigfoot was looking for an invitation to join the camper for the evening meal. The camper tried to form the image of 2 of them sitting together to eat, which the Bigfoot took as the invitation it was meant to be. For around 10 days this guest would be invited to join for the evening meal, and they would sit and eat. The meat would have to be cooler for the Bigfoot to enjoy properly. The writing was getting thicker, as if the hand was writing the information down was heavier than normal. Since the likelihood of the camper gaining such a significant amount of mass to allow this event to occur, the mystery would remain unsolved until the end of the journal. After the 10 days, the Bigfoot put forth the concept of community. The camper put forth the sense of city life, while shaking his head. The Bigfoot frowned, then sensed the concept again, but this time the focus was on the community in the forest, with other Bigfoots. After a while, the camper agreed. The belongings were packed and the pair walked off into the woods. It wouldn't be until they got to the location the Bigfoot was leading him to that the camper noticed that he was finally able to stand eye to eye with his large, quiet friend. 3 more journal entries followed, but the language was very broken English, like trying to describe through concepts in a few words as possible. The entry that the Morticians found interesting was not the communal aspect of the Bigfoot culture, but when the two saw those men, the concept of wrongness, imagined as a black fog with a large red cross in it surrounding those two, and then an image of an endless corridor of trees like a hellish maze. Small food items like berries were used as the concept for small amount of food near the bad man's feet with an early sunrise. It was agreed that the Bigfoot, due to their telepathic nature, could cause people to become lost in their forest through telepathic manipulation, and while not violent, did leave enough food for the 2 bad men so they would not die due to starvation.
Case file Bigfoot Autopsy. Number 01.
The Bigfoot in question was found dead in a national park somewhere within the US. Since the park ranger wanted to be vocal about this discovery, he was gaslit into alcoholism, which, given his family background, took little effort. The Bigfoot was 9.5 feet tall. His mass weighed in around 380 pounds. There was very little fat. The mortician who conducted the autopsy noted that the hair was soft to the touch and the skin was tough to cut through. Preliminary examination showed significant injuries to the torso and the arms. Scratch marks indicated a skinwalker due to the variety of necrotizing fascination in the wounds. What was startling was that there were antibodies for the infections, preventing any decomposition. The musculature was incredibly dense, as was the bone structure. The killing blow seemed to be when the claws of the skinwalker penetrated the heart. There were no adrenal glands within the Bigfoot, nor were there any reproductive organs. But, judging by the above-mentioned journal, it seems that these cryptids can infect others, but only the ones they choose. I would state that Bigfoots are a higher form of cryptid. While their communicative abilities are unique, they have shown to be capable of communicating with others, and their ability to show mercy, when they could have easily killed those men, indicates a higher level of communicative awareness.
I am a deep web archivist.
Case 4. Mothman. Research in popular culture indicates that this winged cryptid is an omen, mainly connected with all ill fortune. Correlations between alleged Mothman sightings and disasters seem to indicate this. There are not many cases involving the Mothman in his archives, mainly due to the fact that this deals with the dead people directly caused by cryptids or other unexplained events. Since the Mothman does not kill, this greatly reduces the amount of information that is available. There are some journals of Mothman events scribed by those who have seen the cryptid.
Case file Mothman Civilian. Number 004.
Journal of 15-year-old girl. Most of the contents are that you would normally find inside a journal of a teenage girl who still kept up with this tradition. The entries of interest in regards to the Mothman are very few. The first entry describes a walk the girl took through a wooded area near her school. She notes how she is confident walking through the woods by herself due to her athleticism. She had also had several years of wilderness experience. The walk was supposed to be about 3 hours. Approximately 40 minutes into this walk, the girl spotted a dead deer, with circular holes in the chest area. She looked around for any sign of the hunter, but this trail was a known walking area, so the chance of a hunter risking the death of an innocent person would be extremely unlikely in her purview. She stood up and continued on her way, and she was bothered by a feeling that she could not describe, like a light buzzing in her mind that kept her very vigilant. After 10 minutes, the girl was brought to a halt when she saw a tall humanoid with wings, glaring at her with red eyes. The sight of this monster caused the girl to bolt. The girl would make notes indicating that she was paranoid about this creature. 2 months later, she would detail her second encounter. This one was more terrifying, as her paranoia had dwindled down slightly until it landed by her bedroom window. Its glowing red eyes would peer into her room, and seeing this tall monster gaze at her brought her paranoia back. She screamed at it to leave, and when her parents came to investigate, they could not see any signs of the monster she described. This is when things took an unusual turn. When the girl was able to control herself long enough to conduct her own investigation, she noted some large gouges in the wall and on several trees. She took photos with a cell phone, and her writing became significantly more manic. She would claim to see it more and more. It began to have a deteriorating effect on her sanity. Her parents pulled her from school due to the repeated screams she would exhibit. Eventually, the girl would be placed into a mental institution. Her suicide occurred 5 years later. Secondary investigation. While some hallmarks of the encounter were similar to the other encounters, the secondary investigation brought to light some intriguing details. First of all, there were no records of a deer carcass found with holes in it along any walking trail. The closest thing was a dead squirrel, which had a singular circular hole in its neck. This was quite decomposed when found, but nothing else found matched the injuries as described. Obviously, the false sightings while she was in public were noted down, but the photos were what drew the attention of the investigators. Out of the 5 working the case, only one of them could see the apparent damage, but going by what that investigator described and what was noted in the journal were almost as conflicting as they were corroborating. This investigator was a known conspiracy theorist who was very fastidious in his investigations, while almost none of them bore fruit. The one leading to his current employment certainly did. This has led to speculation that the apparent correlation leading to the popular belief that Mothman is a harbinger of tragedy could be its ability to cause people to become obsessively paranoid and allow people to look for links that aren't actually there. The parallel theory is what it's called. 2 lines, one denoting tragedies and the other for Mothman sightings. Some dates would mix, but given the population density, the fact that technology is not infallible and human error is also a leading factor, it could be explained that it is 2 lines of events not overlaying, but happening to share the same dates some of the time. I am unsure of what to make of this myself. While this sounds like it sort of debunks the Mothman, I think there is a little more to it than that. Imagine being able to turn some or more observant enemies into paranoid fools. That wouldn't be believed because of the paranoid person no longer fully functions on the same societal norm. Their actions would discredit them, and they would be the boy who called wolf, while they do actually see the wolf. No one else can. It makes no sense to me. I am not sure if it makes sense to you all, but this is one possible interpretation. The Mothman is a aerial scout unit who is able to disguise itself as paranoid delusions, a scout for who or what is yet to be determined. The second interpretation is that it could be weeding out those vulnerable to the Rake. As a cryptid, the Rake is able to have more psychologically draining effect on those who are unfortunate enough to encounter it, and the almost nihilistic viewpoints those people suffer could easily have been paranoid delusions instead. But this is just my interpretation of the cases I have seen and transcribed. Not everyone will agree with me, and that is perfectly fine. But I think there is a lot more to these cryptid entities and the unusual deaths that are not related to any logical chain of events. I am just not sure what that is yet.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 5.
The Rake is a cryptid, feared for the emotional impact it has on its victims. From the cases that I've read, the Rake is related to the Crawler and the Fleshgate. All are pow humanoids whose primary method of locomotion is crawling. While the Crawler and Fleshgate seeking flesh to consume, the Rake does not appear to. Feeding off the negative emotions it can force from others was the main theory of its diet. The various autopsy reports indicate otherwise.
Case file. Rake Civilian. Number 08364.
In the western United States, near 3 designated skinwalker territories and 7 suspected Bigfoot domains, a Rake cryptid manoeuvred its way to a small commune. This was a commune of 4 adults and 5 children. The point of this commune was to return to nature ideology. No cell phones, except for an emergency satellite phone. Due to this, most of the information is from the victims themselves, journals and scribbled notes. That, and the words of the satellite phone, was able to record. The commune was self-sufficient. The runners, as the people in charge dubbed themselves, as they were running the commune, were not the first people to notice the presence of the rake. Like a horror movie cliché, it was the youngest, a 4-year-old male. His journal had the word rake randomly dispersed in the writing for 2 weeks. The more alarming journal post was when the boy mentioned his scary friend. The rake wanted to be let in. So, the boy let in his scary friend. This couldn't be dismissed as fake, but the eldest daughter wrote an evil thing was sitting on the end of her bed, watching her with hollow eyes. Every so often, it would breathe. After what felt like hours, it left, and one word appeared in her mind: rake. This repeated for 4 days, but with each successive night, the rake would pour nihilistic thoughts into the eldest daughter. Depression was swift. Journal entries from the parents noted that their eldest daughter was withdrawn and would only mention one thing: the rake is here for us all. The youngest would exclaim that the rake was a friend, but when pressed into revealing his friend, the boy would mumble that it is shy. The eldest son, believing his youngest sibling, decided to hunt for the rake. The uncle of the commune accompanied the eldest son. Their bodies wouldn't be recovered until the secondary investigation. Subsequent journal entries indicated that the voices of the two would-be hunters could be heard, but the youngest would block the door and say his scary friend was teasing the commune. When pressed for details, the youngest boy describes his scary friend and how he would make him and his eldest sister think thoughts of death. The rest of the commune would try to convince the boy except for the remaining sibling. She would show the sketches she had been drawing for months. Sketches of a pale individual with very long black claws, voids for eyes, gazing directly at the viewer with an intensity that should be impossible. The last journal entries of the commune, except for the youngest, expressed private concerns, as they all had those feelings of nihilism and of the inevitability of the rake. The youngest boy's last written words were, "I'm sorry." Autopsy 1. Eldest boy. Slashing marks at the calf muscles, cleaving the muscle in two. Presence of adrenaline in the system indicates that he was in a state of fight or flight. Femoral artery was pierced cleanly. Death was slow due to a smaller puncture wound on the femoral artery. Autopsy 2. Uncle. Deep lacerations to the chest. Wounds to the arms indicate defensive wounds. Autopsy 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. That's the mother, father, middle child, the boy, and youngest son, and eldest daughter, and aunt. All found dead, sitting at the dining table. Post-mortem evidence indicates the bodies were moved after death. Every person sitting at the table showed no outward signs of death. However, when the brain was examined, multiple scars were found throughout the brain. All the scars were arched as if in repeated bite marks. Missing child, youngest daughter. Evidence strongly implicates the daughter as the one who moved the bodies of the family to the inside of the commune dining area. Her fingerprints match 6 pictures placed in front of the appropriate victim on the table. Footsteps of the youngest lead out of the commune and disappear alongside the tracks of the rake. Rake Information. The rake is an entity that feeds on induced nihilistic thoughts. People who are naturally nihilistic are immune to the enhancing effects that a rake naturally emits. This is thought to be an extension of the crawler's fear aura. The rake is a humanoid creature that moves on all fours like an animal. Long claws are seen from the forelegs. However, the evidence indicates that the length is a gauge. While the rake does have claws, as evidenced by the hundreds of bodies it has attacked, the length is quite short. But the length is likely to allow the rake to deduce how much nihilism or basic fear that the would-be victim produces. Due to the inherent nature of the rake, firearms have an interminable effect, as people are either too scared or nihilistic to actually make an attempt. The rake, due to its feeding capabilities, will, when it finds a suitable host, torment the victim with night visits and the aforementioned aura of nihilism. There is a theory that the youngest daughter was taken not for food, but to make another Rake. While this is wholly speculation, it is the best theory that is agreed upon the majority of the Morticians. As you can imagine, there were a lot of cases I had to sort through. After reading about the nihilism aura that the Rake apparently projects, I must admit I do ponder what would happen if I ever encountered this cryptid, or its variations. Also, finding out if these things can be killed would be helpful knowledge. I do apologise for the lateness of this case, but there were interruptions that required greater attention than normal.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 6.
Werewolves, or the more encompassing term, therianthropes, unlike the deplorable representation in the crimes against literature referred to as the Twilight Saga, or as I prefer to call it, why I'm glad I have no emotional connections to people. From the vocal interjections, Teen Wolf would be a far greater viewpoint. Apparently the therianthropes are more like guardians than monsters. Some therianthropes can have their minds twisted by their capabilities. Therianthropy refers to the ability to turn into an animal through unknown means. Werewolves are the more acknowledged example of this, but apparently any strong enough connection to a spirit animal and training that differs from person to person, you can actually gain the ability to shapeshift. This shift is to a hybrid form of human and animal, but very rare therianthropes can shift completely into the animal form, though these are more rare than an honest used car salesman. Before I continue, I will point out that the Morticians that granted me permission have asked that I only archive certain cases involving therianthropes and any victims, but they would rather that this be more educational than threatening. I was able to point out that an example of the therianthrope who went blood mad, as they termed it, would be useful. They were not happy, but after several hours of heated discussion, they relented, grudgingly, but only if I went into great detail about therianthropy and the differences to cryptids like skinwalkers. Like previously mentioned, therianthropy, or shifting, is different to the few other forms that other cryptids are able to replicate. The closest example is the skinwalker. However, due to the secrecy of Native American shamanistic rituals, we are unable to explain the ritual, and given the levels of stupidity and curiosity people can demonstrate, Tide Pods, I wouldn't post that information anyway, even if I did possess it. For therianthropy, the training stages allows the shifter to adapt to things like the skin of the animals, the muscles and speed. But the most tricky aspect is the mentality. Physical changes can be eased in to allow greater control, but the mental changes are the parts where shifters can turn feral in the human mind doesn't gain dominance. One of these cases will be used as an example below. However, those who do make the shift successfully, they elect to use their powers to hunt the more dangerous cryptids and play guard duty for the bigger dangers. Though while these therians were effective in cryptid combat, they couldn't fight them all. The Rake has an especially destabilising effect on therianthropes. The skinwalker trigger a truly heightened fight or flight response. The fight would be to the death, typically the therian. The common therian forms are wolf, horse, boar and bear. There are others, but I am asked to mention them only in the relevant case files. The case file I have chosen, and had to defend my choice for, is one involving the last true werewolf. I have been asked to omit any dates, as there are still hunters out there who are trawling sites like this, looking for clues to therian threat. They are obsessed with killing therians.
Case file Werewolf, Therian, number 001. Final.
Journals and maps indicate the location of where the last true werewolf was eventually killed. The language is not English, but something I was able to get translated. Again, the language is not something I am allowed to disclose. We have been hunting him for the past 6 weeks. His aggressive nature is causing his trail to be easy. But we are patient. We know he is the last. The Inquisition, the Shadow One, has killed many werewolves and eliminated most of the more insidious vampires. But this Lycan has proved to be a cunning predator. Almost apex. He has avoided the small hamlets in the area. He must be hungry. This makes him even more dangerous. A predator that is hunted, hungry and desperate. I do not expect any of us to live through this hunt, but his death is required. Therion 2 has informed us that we have found a lair. Tracks and recent kills indicate that it could be the lichens. We spread out and attune our senses to sharpen. There are 5 other Therions, including myself. Therion 4 is a bear shifter. She is looking at the mouth of the lair with an odd expression.
Human.
The Therion whispered. All of our eyes snap at each other. This changes things. A hostage or a snack. Unless we move, the human is dead. As the hunt leader, I walk into the clearing. I am a wolf shifter. There are 2 boar shifters, the bear shifter and a horse shifter. The others follow me into the small clearing. The boars were twins. They nod at me. We know our roles. The boars were to play bait. The horse shifter was a trained healer. The bear shifter is the main powerhouse. As a wolf, I have an inherent understanding of team leadership. I howl, reaching that primal aspect, ensuing a challenge. The others scatter to their positions. I stand in front of the lair mouth. A growl that seems to shake the entire forest ripples from the lair. It stalked out with restrained strength. I charged at it, and I knew the response. It charged at me. The lichen leaped at me, but I slid along the ground as the boars charged in together. Their tusks barely broke its skin. From this point the writing could change in style. The language was the same, but the writing is much shakier. It was apex. A lichen reached the pinnacle. We won't survive this fight. The bear charged in with a roar like a volcano. The blow seemed to shake the very air around us all. The leader started darting in and out, snapping at the hamstrings and other weak points. The boars started to mirror their attacks, aiming for the same spot on the opposite side, if that makes sense. The fight was the most brutal I have ever seen. The lichen's claws easily ripped through our flesh. The bear was greatly wounded, and the hunt leader was missing his throat. Still clutched in the lichen's right hand, the surviving boar was being held up in the left hand, and its kicks were getting weaker. I move and strike. My kicks are powerful. I reach out with a kick and slam into its throat. I can feel the windbox collapse beneath my hoof. He throws the boar away. A loud crack answers the question I dreaded. I start to dart aside, but with his last few breaths, he managed to slash against my stomach. Then he collapsed. I took the book from the leader and have documented the final fight. I am dying. But this needs to be recorded. I am going to ask the human who is staring at us. Get him to hand this journal into a sage. We fought well.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 7.
I remember reading somewhere that the rate that herd animals are killed by predators in Africa is the same rate as the number of people who just completely disappear. Some of these are fodder for the dark web and the like, but what about the people who don't just disappear, but are known to die through tragic happenstance? Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 and other similar events. The Titanic is one, and the dreaded Bermuda Triangle. As implied, I did spot some of the missing in the dark web, but what happened to the larger groups of people who die? And their bodies are mostly unrecoverable. There is a bit more to their deaths, judging by the records I have seen. Dragons are real, but since they cannot be controlled or weaponized by conventional means, plusation seems to be the on-hand tactic for dealing with them. While there are not many in the world, as those details have been scrubbed from any specific mention, and given the complete radio silence from Russia and China, we would be unable to provide an exact number anyway. Every so often, a large group of people who vanish tragically. Flight 370 is a fairly public and recent event similar to what is described. 239 people, or as they have become viewed as portions of a meal. Every so often, a group of over 150 people would disappear, presumed to be dead. They are divvied up and prepared per the dragon's requirements. If the cooks are able to preserve some of the body parts, it will be the only piece found for closure of the bereaved families. This has been going on for a while. decades at least. As time goes on, the number of people that need to disappear increases, or the frequency in which groups vanish. I am well aware of how it sounds. Then I thought about it, especially for modern times, specifically mobile phones. Ever wonder why you were asked to turn them off when you're onto flights? They say it's so it doesn't mess up with the instruments. But if I was going to design an interconnected system to stay in control of an airborne vehicle that can be measured in the number of elephants, I would make sure that there is no way that the mobile phone network in absolutely no way interferes with my systems. We have all seen the signal strength indicators on those devices. Why can't we just actively track mobile phones by signal strength? It obviously makes a connection with the tower or network, so it's plausible. All they would need, in theory, is to search for those missing people's phones along the network and use that to triangulate the location of the majority of them. Sure, water damage could affect, but they still had a connection before the damage. All it would take is the records of these events to narrow it down. Anyway, I know you are here for more than my observations. There is a journal of a dragon discoverer, and the autopsy of said discoverer as well.
Case file, Dragon, number 013.
I have been travelling through the jungle for weeks now. I'm reasonably certain that I'm lost. However, I am not new to these expeditions and pay attention to the surroundings. I have also been here before, so I have that as an advantage. I heard a noise last night. Something is stalking me through this jungle. I'm going to set up my tent and write once more. I have a clue what is going on. Several days are passed, with rough distance travelled and the direction. I have never experienced silence like this. The only sound I can hear is the scratching of pen on paper. I can barely hear myself breathe. When writers describe a sense of dread blanketing the area being described, I now fully appreciate and hate it. I can't focus. I should be 2 days away from the cave system I am looking for, though when I think about it, I really don't want to go. 2 more days with notes pass. It hasn't killed me, but I don't know how much longer I can keep it entertained. I know the source of dread now, and seeing it, I almost wish the soul-crushing emotion, dragons, are real. I am staring at one right now. Dark scales cover this glorious monster, at least 40 feet long. It just lies there, bones all around it. When I entered the cave, I didn't even see it until it blocked the passage when I went to leave. When it speaks to me, it is excruciating, not in volume, just the raw power of its voice. He says I am his first visitor in a long while. It spoke at me for hours. I'm not sure. My bones are still aching. For all I know, it could be minutes, but the pain is excruciating, and I have been bitten by a bullet ant. Several sketches of the dragon are seen in the journal. I hear movement from the cave mouth. The dragon is awake and smiling. It is the most horrifying smile I have ever seen. A large metal cage filled with corpses gets pushed in. The journal ends here. Apparently, the Morticians are part of a larger shadow community. It is through another aspect of the community that the journal was passed on. Curiosity, it was not been destroyed. When I asked the Morticians why it wasn't destroyed, they reminded me that it is plausible to follow the man's path. There is an autopsy file of the explorer. Autopsy, male, late 30s. Bone structure is riddled with microfractures. Skeletal structure was compromised. Cause of death was a morphine overdose administered while explorer was asleep. Apparently, dragons can cause microfractures to normal human bones due to the intensity of their power. But the humans with the LRP5 mutation with gain of function are able to resist the damage. However, since the known LRP5 mutations are of interest to the scientific community, the LRP5 ones who are not tracked are encouraged to assist the shadow community. As a side note, an agent who wishes to speak with me has been knocking on my door for the past hour. I will speak with her momentarily. I will update you depending on how the conversation progresses.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 8A.
Apologies for the delayed update. But the conversation with the agent I previously mentioned has consequences that demanded an immediate response. While a certain government has been keeping abreast of my updates, they approached me solely due to my history, specifically Case 1. The base where I was last deployed to had been operating smoothly. Too smoothly for anything having to deal with the government or military bureaucracy. They asked, as gently as any secretive government agency concerned about the integrity of a military base on US soil, for me to accompany them on a base visit. We left immediately. The ride to the base was tense, judging by the very slight shifting of the 3 agents I was accompanying. We got to a cheap motel an hour's drive from the base and booked in for the night. While I was handed a uniform to change into, I pondered over some of the cases I had read and not archived yet, when an epiphany occurred. What if the Morticians and whoever else pondered about the cryptids were wrong about the relationship between the Rake, the Fleshgate, and the Crawler? What if they weren't offshoots, but aggressive scouts? I am unsure for whom they are scouting, but this is just an alternate perspective based on facts. The Rake and the Fleshgate are reported to have some influence over the human mind. The Rake is more psyops, and the Fleshgate is more focused on infiltration tactics. The Crawler would be a shock troop, focusing on the aspect of fear when people notice the truly inhuman speeds that they can actually exhibit. Taking this into perspective in the real world situation, the best way to know how to use your scouts effectively is to test them against people who are less observant, to see how the scout and their targets will react. Remember, we are not dealing with humans spying on humans, but monsters spying on humans. Who would believe you? If you say that you saw a monster watching you, you would be teased or ignored. Only the people who have also witnessed these monsters would believe you, and as a group you would be disregarded or mocked. So, looking at the premise of this being regarded as a joke, let's push forward and go for execution. How would these invaders do just that? They could go for small civilian population. With the inherent capabilities they possess, they could, if they were methodical, take over very swiftly and easily. But all it would tell them is what they already know. They can cause fear, paranoia, and despondency. But what about military personnel? Not the elite special forces, but the bread and butter of the armed forces. A small base of little consequence in the grand scheme of the situations. A good testing ground. A petri dish of sorts, like the base I was deployed to for many of my promotional examinations. If this agency just wanted to grab me, I doubt I could have stopped them if they rushed me. Them wanting a dialogue that they progress to our current situation could indicate that this is totally insane theory actually had some basis. Looking over the uniform, I remember that event and the decisions I made, and something struck me as unusual. There isn't supposed to be a Wendigo that close to base. It ranged almost 80 miles further away. Something is up, and I think this situation almost certainly ties in. After an hour I settled down into my room. The primary agent entered the room. The look on her face was an expression of concern. When I pressed for details, she mentioned that her team was acting strangely, like they were waiting for prompts in conversation. She asked to stay in the same room as she didn't trust the 3 agents in the other room. With my knowledge of the units I was travelling with, I agreed. I volunteered to sleep on the couch. Naturally, I wasn't stupid to actually fall asleep. I came up with 3 agents. The one in charge and her 2 subordinates. We never met any additional staff. I had a plan, and needed to work carefully. Since I was suspecting a mass infiltration of Fleshgate, I focused on the thoughts of returning to the base, and only those thoughts. The night was long, but all 5 of us packed into the SUV and drove the rest of the way to the base. As we were let in, I noticed the guard watched me intensely. Stepping out of the vehicle and walking around, we noticed that all of them were staring at me, until it was noticed by us. The layout hadn't changed, and I was asked how I wished to proceed. The agent in charge decided to speak with the base commander. I sat in on the meeting. The base commander seemed to be in control, but there was small details that I kept noticing. Odd twitches, overlong glances shifting uncomfortably. They were small, but I could see them. They offered a tour of the grounds, which was accepted by the agents, but I declined. When asked, I reminded them that I'd already attended this base in the past, but would like to visit the spot of my old shame, An escort was offered, and I took the opportunity. During my time at the base, I had paid attention to natural caves or overhangs in the area. Should I somehow not make it back in time during an overlong excursion, while I'm not sure how the Wendigo and Fleshgates would interact, I had a flash of inspiration. My escort was a 4-man squad, who were behaving well, except for the sidelong glances I would catch. As we got closer to the site of the incident, their pacing shifted slightly. They were getting ready to jump me. I tackled the soldier to the side, grabbing his combat knife while we ran. The other 3 opened fire. Fortunately, by the time they started firing at the time I tackled their 4th, was enough for me to get behind a tree. The knife went into the throat of the Fleshgate, stripping his weapons off his body. I counter-attacked and was able to eliminate the 3 remaining Fleshgates. Fleshgates bleed an off-pink colour, and the consistency is thicker than blood. I removed them from their weaponry, and some MREs just in case. I looked around, trying to get my bearings, and headed away from the base. It took me half an hour to find what I suspected. A dead Wendigo. I grabbed some poisonous mushrooms and took them closer to base. I couldn't fight everyone there with standard weapons. They could scatter too easily. But we all need to eat, and hopefully they are susceptible to poison. As you can likely ascertain, they were. I will write up the details of the rest of the encounter and how the truth was kept hidden from the government, plus the various autopsies that will be conducted. I also met a retired mortician.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 8, B.
Sorry for the delay. This has been a difficult case file to finish up writing up, mainly due to the repercussions of my actions. Like I previously mentioned, I was suspicious regarding the personnel on the base, and given what I found in the forest, I took precautions. Knowing the poisonous herbs and mushrooms in the area, I took a significant amount. The base personnel amount was wrong. There are likely to be more discrepancies, and I know that one of those agents is likely to be another Fleshgate. I have the tools to do what is required, but deployment will be difficult. I needed to affect as many people as I can, including the agents. I am the only person I know is not affected. I got little sleep, not that any reasonable individual would in this situation. Knowing some protocols, I was able to use the natural poisonous substances to infect the food and cooking utensils. Hours later, the infiltrators started to succumb to the poison. I figured it would be likely that I would be identified as the culprit. Fortunately, when I was based here, I would plot how I would assault this base. Positions to use for choke points, places to hide myself or supplies. While the army personnel do not carry normally, the agents would be required to arm myself. The agent who brought me here figured me out. I acted, slamming her against the wall, my hand over her mouth, and fought her for her weapon. 2 discharges went wild during the struggle, and I was able to wrest control. 1 to the guy, 1 to the head. Blood poured from the wounds. I grabbed her spare clip and her cell phone. Tossing the cell phone to the side once I left the building, I went on an assault. It took me 2 hours to kill everyone. I received a total of 5 gunshots. Ignoring the pain, I noticed that not all bodies bled red. Almost 65% of the bodies seemed to be slightly deflate upon death, and the liquid they leaked was not red, but a light pink colour. It also didn't look like blood. The consistency was slightly thicker, almost like mustard. When I was searching for the commander's office, who was a Fleshgate, I created a throwaway email account and emailed a Mortician contact. I sent them a direct dial number for the office only. 8 seconds later, the phone rang. I told them about the Fleshgate infiltration into this base. I explained my actions to them, and they advised they would send a retired mortician to attend the site. While they never dealt with autopsies anymore, they stayed with the organisation. I waited. Part of me wanted to move the bodies to make corpse retrieval easier, but the practical side of me said that they would likely be upset with me disturbing the evidence. Sitting in the commander's office, the wait was long. I wanted to focus on how to identify Fleshgates, but it would require resources I do not have access to, and I also had no major inclination to look too deeply into it. I appreciated my archivist duties. While being active would be appreciated, I would rather just archive. The retired mortician arrived in a large truck. 3 people piled out the back. I met them at the gate. As they approached on foot, I pulled out a knife. I explained that some of the corpses were flesh gates and bled a different colour. I cut myself slightly and bled. The others complied with the request and showed the same colour. I was mentally projecting an off-green colour, but it seems these were humans. I walked the Mortician through the assault on the base, and I explained about the cryptid corpse in the woods. The retired Mortician thanked me for my detail when I spotted his name tag. I confirmed that this was the Mortician that retired after a mush corpse. His face paled significantly at the mere mention of the incident. He politely advised that I do not mention that event ever again. Pointedly would be more apt way to describe it. The bodies were placed into a truck and we all piled in. The ride back was quiet. The one thing I did not expect was the haunted look that we all shared. Everyone here had a personal encounter with a cryptid. It took me a while to recover significantly from my injuries. While that transpired, the autopsies were conducted. Instead of doing a breakdown of each individual one, I will convey the pertinent details. Humans. Poison from deathcap mushroom. Ingested. Likely cause of death. The ones who survived the initial poison were shot multiple times, with a bullet to the head post-mortem. This actually caused some trouble for the attending morticians, as there seemed to be discrepancy in the parts of the brain governing memory and perception. The damage makes it hard to verify if it all suffered the same level of inflammation, triggering what could be attributed to the false memories. Flesh gates. Humanoid with a similar skeletal structure, made of hardened cartilage in an approximate facsimile of the human skeleton. Upon death, the cartilage softens, given the slightly deflated appearance as noted by the asset who eliminated the nest of infiltrators. The musculature also seems to have more fluid quality, allowing the flesh gates to alter their forms to better reflect upon the false memories they impart. The brain has extra sections, which are theorized to affect others, allowing false memories to allow easier infiltration. Extra glands are filled with a pheromone which allows for weakening of the immune system, allowing the telepathic manipulations to occur more easily within victims. Wendigo. Cryptid. Elongated humanoid. Deterioration of the vocal cords and the speech part of the brain indicates that the natural vocabulary is slightly diminished. The state of this part of the brain is equivalent to that of a baby learning to speak. Copying sounds here with no understanding of context. The skin was thickened to deal with the lower temperatures they are readily exposed to, which also helps act as a natural form of body armour. The musculature is approximately 8 times greater than a human's, which also helps the body toughness. Claws are hardened nails to the levels thought impossible. The Wendigo was beaten to death, which, given the resilience this particular specimen demonstrated, speaks greatly of the effectiveness of flesh gates. This is the third infiltration attempt in the past 60 years.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 9.
There were 4 experiments regarding the Ouija board, from what I have seen. 3 of these cases showed no significant supernatural events, other than flickering of an entity. The 4th and final one demanded a cessation of these trials, once they recovered all the parts they could find.
Experiment. Ouija. Number 04. Final.
3 couples had been manipulated into performing a Ouija board inside an abandoned home that had been fitted with a surveillance camera and microphones. 2 of these couples were not strong believers in the supernatural, not completely closed-minded however. The primary couple were religious, but not aggressively so. They brought a Ouija board from their home and chatted casually while setting up the board and planquette. The secondary and tertiary couples were not thrilled when they saw the board itself, but complied with the urging to partake. Customary opening rituals were performed, with what is believed to be a prayer. The audio did not reflect this. All that could be heard was screaming and begging for mercy for several minutes while the 3 couples just sat there, praying. As they finished, the screaming stopped and they asked the opening question. The only camera that didn't immediately turn to static was the one in the living area, where the Ouija board was set up. When I reviewed the tapes for archiving, I determined it would be smoke, not static. Not sure how we got different observations regarding this. As the questions started, properly, there would be movement in the static or smoke. Humanoid at times, and not at other times. The noises made from those locations resembled growling, not bestial, more primal. The only properly functioning camera revealed a seventh entity within that room, a tall humanoid with black skin and warped legs. It wasn't looking at the couples but directly into the camera. The primary couple were a bit more energetic than the other two couples for undiscernible reasons. The microphone in that area was transmitting a conversation, even though it was working up until the completion of the opening question. The notes from the researcher spearheading this indicated that he could hear the couples talking just fine. They were trying to contact the spirit of a deceased grandmother of the male of the Tatari couple. Names would be given, but the remains were not identified, just matched to what was left. 3 minutes of questions later, the primary male glanced at a mirror and noticed the humanoid staring at them via the reflection. He went to yell but was unable to make a sound. The others glanced at him oddly. Then a voice came from the primary male. Impossibly deep, the voice demanded they resume the experiment. This was underlined in the notes as well. When someone would attempt to question, the humanoid would raise a hand and scratch the air, but wounds would appear on the interjector. The voice would demand they resume. The face of the entity would flinch, like something not used to a facial structure would try to emulate a smile they saw someone else do from a great distance. The question became intensely personal, and going by the investigation conducted by the organisation, the answers given were false. The questions were not for those of a perverted sense of morality. The answers would be dragged out by the plaquette, while the other 5 would vainly attempt to remove themselves. The entity's body started to flinch in what would be approximated as laughter. The notes for the experiment stopped abruptly during the observation that some aberration was making their way down the hall. It is here, and it is happy at me. Those are the last lines from the case file. The footage goes black. There would be a 2-day pause, and then the head researcher who was personally overseeing the experiment would be located in a remote Danish bed and breakfast, and parts of the 6 volunteers would be discovered in the bed. When the matter was brought up to the attention of the local police, the organisation were able to take control over the case and subsequent investigations. The room was covered in uncoagulated blood and faecal matter. Phrases in a language thought to be Latin were seen, but the translation team were unable to translate. They tried the rest of the global human lexicon with no success. The translation team would complain of seeing a writhing humanoid form haunting them 3 days before they commit impossible suicides. One was found hanging by a spider web. One had shot themselves in the head with no gun, residue or casing. Just a hole that matched the .38 caliber bullets with no indication of significant velocity. Just trace amounts of unignited gunpowder. The other swallowed medicine pills not available for commercial release for another 3 years, as the chemical formula was still being worked on. 3 left feet, 5 right feet, 2 right hands, 4 left legs, all missing fingers. 4 1/3 of a torso, 3.5 pairs of legs, 6 sets of teeth, 4 skulls, all disembodied pre-mortem. The aforementioned body parts were found in the same bed as the head researcher, who woke up to the sight and screamed. The DNA were able to match up what was found to the missing couples. Semen was found on various pieces that matched the head researcher. The head researcher states that after everything went black on the screens, the entity abducted him and forced him to endure torture for a period of time that he has no words to describe other than hellish. He stated that he could see the couples were suffering lesser forms of torture, but the entities inflicting the pain and agony highlighted that the head researcher was to blame, as he wanted to see if demons and hell were real. Autopsies of the parts recovered show multiple fractures on the skeletal structure, tearing of muscles. Torsos had the traditional wire cut of an autopsy. However, the scarring indicates that the wounds healed multiple times. The head researcher refuses to fall asleep, saying he sees them when he closes his eyes. Whether he is referring to the demons or the people whose torture he caused, he will refuse to clarify. The head researcher also shows the same autopsy scarring. No further research is planned regarding the Ouija board. and I have asked the Morticians that if they hear anyone moronic enough to try another experiment to notify me immediately so I can kill them. I am sorry for the delays in posting these case files, but it turns out since my efforts regarding the infiltrated military base, I will be doing some field work with the retired Mortician. We are to head to Scandinavia in the next couple of days.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 10.
The Mortician and I have returned from our excursion to Scandinavia. It was enlightening. We flew to Oslo first. The airport was busy, as you can imagine, but the Mortician and I were fairly silent during the flight, except answering the questioning asked by the air hosts. Our luggage for this leg was fairly light, only a few days of clothes and toiletries. The Mortician didn't understand why I didn't want us to take cold weather and hiking gear from the US. I pointed out that the climatic and geographical differences for the areas we would be hiking through, compared to the majority of the United States. In Norway and other regions of Scandinavian area, the gear would be better suited for their climate and terrain, so buying it from there would be a wiser choice. We dropped our luggage off at a hotel and went shopping. We got boots, jackets and a couple of tents, and other hiking utensils. We also got a couple of larger suitcases to help us cart our new gear as we got closer to our next phase of this journey. One long bus trip to a place named we mangled in our pronunciation later. We had been in Norway for a couple of days. During the bus journey, there was an odd sensation. Like I am walking through a garden and the owners are very keen of my presence. It is a very weighty sensation. We headed to our new hotel for a couple of days and we looked into the local legends of the small town that we're in. Nothing overly promising, but I did voice the experience I had on the journey. We asked around and got the look at the funny American tourist reaction from most of the people on the town. But the Mortician and I had instructions to follow, the task of trying to locate any trolls in the Scandinavian area. Given my military background and the funds the Mortician was working with, he would be able to navigate the wilderness fairly well. The local populace mentioned some of the more dangerous plants in the area. We packed up and headed off, making sure to tell the local police station that we were planning on a week-long hike. Not much happened on the first day, and it was the second day when we both felt that judgmental gaze upon us. Mid-morning on the third day, we found a large rock covered with moss. I remember the initial research I did on these cryptids and their believed behavioural patterns. There was what looked to be part of a wall below this rock. Scandinavian trolls were believed to have thrown rocks at churches. I looked around and I saw that the hillside area seemed a little odd. I approached carefully. The Mortician watched warily.
Hollow man.
A voice grated. Have you ever bitten a metal fork? And you get that awkward sensation of metal on teeth. That's what the voice sounds like, but for the entire skeleton. The Mortician approached.
Truth seeker.
The voice stated.
Why are you here?
I could see a set of eyes staring out from the hillside, watching us with a timeless gaze. It was an actual troll. It appears to be sitting down, so I can't give an accurate observation regarding its size, but from its huddled position, it was at least 4 stories high. We seek to know more about you, the Mortician called out. The troll focused his gaze and spoke.
How many pulp men?
I know of 3. I answer. The Mortician grips my shoulder with surprising tightness and adds, 12 more that we know of.
And those are out of time?
The troll was more insistent on this question. I started to answer, stating that I was unsure of what he means, but when the Mortician spoke up. 28 were pulp men. The troll nodded and closed his eyes.
We resume slumber. Our watch will start soon, he grated.
Day was slipping away and we would need to camp soon. We set up our camp and I waited for the Mortician to speak. Very rarely, one of the corpses we get is for someone not in our time period. Never from the future. always from the past. Sometimes these are also pulp men, as the troll calls them. He explained formally. I shake my head at the thought of a pulp man. Not cryptids in the traditional sense, just people who died repeatedly under so many causes of death, it was literally impossible to determine the cause. The accumulated injuries turn the skeleton, muscle and organs into pulp. Autopsies are messy affairs. We ate some of the MREs and extinguished our very small fire. We turned in for the night. Some of it, anyway. Crashing was the only warning we got. Something very big was charging through, elephant or rhino size. I clambered out of my tent and saw a very tall humanoid running right at me.
Hollow man,
He declared. The Mortician was making his way out of the tent when I ran. Grab your shit and leave Norway! I shouted as I ran past. The thudding of the being behind me was like the bass of a vehicle cranked to obscene levels. I didn't run out of fear per se. I just knew that this thing wanted to kill and or eat me. Running lengthened my life expectancy in strides. Running through a Norwegian forest, being chased by something that would dwarf an elephant. Knowing it wants to eat just for existing is an experience I never wish to repeat. The only slightly saving grace for me, as the odd hours light seems to have in this part of the northern hemisphere, I could barely make it out of the roots, thick bushes and fallen branches. I used prey tactics to survive. I took sharp turns up to 90 degrees. I ran close or through very thick parts of the forest. This forced the thing to slow down. A little bit. I made it into a large open area after emerging from the forest. I ran a bit ahead and turned to face the thing. Why do you seek to kill me? I yelled. The thing slowed to a stop. It was a tall, bulky-looking human with bulbous facial features, except for the eyes, which were set in quite deep into its face.
Hollow man will end world with broken time. Eat hollow man, world will live.
It growled. Would all trolls know this? I asked.
Hollow man should stop talk.
I spoke with the troll yesterday. He didn't kill me. I might not be the hollow man that will break time. I write about strange things in the world.
Gods and all followers.
It asked, stuttering slightly. No, dogman, skinwalkers, Wendigo, pulp men, demons, the things that live in this world that the world tried to ignore or hide from. This is not my concern. Strange creatures are, I state.
Dog men, not natural. Troll talk.
It said, turning back the way we came.
I talk troll. Hollow man can leave. But if I see you again, I eat you.
It says, as it straightens itself up and walks the way we ran from. I watch it walk away before walking away myself. As I did, I pondered what I knew about these cryptids, trolls and ogres. I am of the view that the being that chased me was a Norwegian troll, known for consuming the flesh of those of a Christian faith. I consider these to be ogres, powerful creatures, but not overly bright. They grow or consume enough to grow into trolls. Trolls have a greater purpose in the view of our world. I just have no idea what it could be.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 11.
While there are some known cryptids in the water, either in the depths of the ocean or the relative shallows of the inland lakes and rivers, they are more likely to submerge rather than cause acts of violence that would bring the attention of the Morticians to their activities. But there is a cryptid that is closely tied to the waters. There have been sightings of these creatures, though not as many as large case files I have to document, referred to as the Montauk monster, and reported as a hairless sloth. It turns out that there is more of these creatures than the mainstream media do not wish to report. While I may find it unusual, those with an emotional range greater than Edward Cullen in those movies may find it very disconcerting.
Case file. Cryptid. Aquatic. Montauk. Number 0386.
The location of this body is near the city of Seattle, Washington, in the United States. The body was washed ashore and spotted by a passerby. The desk sergeant who got the call was an informant for the Morticians, who after hearing about another Montauk, notified them immediately. The body was examined and the results were noted down. Autopsy. The cause of death was suffocation. The biology, as noted in other Montauk autopsies, not that the creature was adapted to aquatic life as evidenced by the grills on the side of the neck and beneath the armpits. The skin is soft and the evidence of the scale molting is detectable around the hands and feet. The brain is shown to have regressed from original human body. The skeletal structure is a misnomer, as the skeleton is more elongated cartilage, and the musculature of the spine has been redesigned to allow a hands-free swimming form of locomotion. Speculation on the Montauks. As this is all theoretical and conjecture, there has been no case of a living Montauk being captured to prove or deny these theories. It is believed that very, very rare individuals who have been or involved in a crash involving vehicles and deep waters, that they go an emergency evolution de-evolution. These highly unique individuals are theoretical, as the DNA of the Montauks and regular humans is different in some key areas. However, DNA tracing shows similarities to certain bloodlines around the world. However, the rest is mixed with fish DNA, which takes into the account the gills and scales. Why Montauks beach themselves like whales is a mystery, though it is believed that a dormant part of the mind that has access to memories of being on land, they then try to replicate that and of course suffocate. Though the grouplings of these creatures has been brought to repeat attention, Panama, Japan, Australia theoretically, and the coastlines of the US seem to be major points of these creatures, but the reasons are not readily apparent. Given the history of these creatures, it is unlikely that in any way they are related to the military Dogman experiments. The forced combination of fish and human DNA would not be readily viable. Dolphin would theoretically be better, but we are not here to correct the scientific experiments of those with no moral compass, just to document the strange creatures of this world, and any corpses they make or leave behind. As I read over the case files of these Montauk creatures, I am surprised at the lack of theory regarding the mythical city of Atlantis and the viable possibility. But there might be something in these case files regarding this. The retired mortician has popped in to see me a few times since we made it back from our encounter with the troll and ogre. He has never autopsied a Montauk, observing that if he had, then maybe the mush corpse wouldn't have affected him so badly. His skin pales again at the thought of his last autopsy he performed, but he doesn't vomit, which is progress. I am curious about these Montauk creatures. If the theory is true that they are truly rare humans who can do a rapid form of evolution, I ponder whether it is a step forwards or backwards for evolution in human beings. The former mortician has asked if I would be willing to accompany him on further excursions, or even actual cryptid hunts, for the more dangerous ones out there. I stated in explicit terms that I would not hunt a skinwalker without significant firepower or greater knowledge of them. That was when the mortician showed me files I had pushed aside in favour of more intriguing cryptids. He noted that all cryptids seem to abandon areas where mush corpses were recovered for months. As I have repeated these mush corpses in the past, I will give a very brief overview. Mush corpses are humans who have, thanks to modern technology and the ability to record audio, have apparently been subjected to hundreds of deaths in a perverse Groundhog Day loop, and then, after whatever causes them to suffer deaths that are literally impossible, the body would be found in a public area to be recovered. However, the overwhelming trauma was reduced everything that is not skin into mush. This isn't visually detectable. Only tactile inspections reveal the horrifying discovery. It is of little wonder why these discoveries force morticians to quit and apparently swear off soft foods altogether. Even the ambulance drivers who had to transport the body quit immediately after delivery of the body. At first it was assumed that the deaths were caused by some unknown organism. However, due to aforementioned commercial flooding of portable recording technology, you can listen to every single death the victim has endured. They seem to be unaware of their fate unless they can see the cause. The one thing that really makes the body so upsetting is that the skin is completely unharmed. Apparently cleaning up after yet another attempted autopsy on these bodies is almost as bad as the autopsy attempt itself.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 12.
While I was pursuing the case files in regards to coastline accounts to get information on the water-based cryptids, I found an unsettling account that, while not all related, makes me, of all people, feel uncomfortable. This town was not based on the coastline, but it was within 50 miles. The original population was 263 before the event. The name has been scrubbed thoroughly from any historical records that I have access to. While the Morticians mainly deal with corpses of or made by cryptids, this was an isolated incident, until I found 6 other towns who also suffered the same disconcerting fates. No known pattern, country or any motive could be discerned.
Case file. Incident Candyland. Town 01.
In the year 1873 there was a town, whose name is no longer recorded, who went silent. The neighbouring communities investigated this unusual activity and at first found nobody walking around the town. A deputy who had made the trip decided to investigate further. He entered a small saloon. He submitted his investigation in the report below. I came to erased after Mr. Sampson reported that the farmers hadn't sent their shipment of oats. The sheriff sent me to investigate. Travelling wasn't too bad, as it was a place I have been to from time to time. But as I drew closer, my stomach started to churn uncomfortably. Pressing on, as I trotted into the main town hall area, I felt something very bad had happened. I had seen no children, no farmers, nobody. It was a ghost town. A ghost town won't haunt me like what I saw in the saloon. Entering the saloon, I saw 3 people sitting around a table in the middle of a game of cards, and the barkeep was behind the bar. But the first thing that tipped me off was the air smelled sticky and sickly sweet. None of them were moving. I walked towards the card players, but they never reacted to me. I called out to them, but they were like dummies. The sweet smell got stronger. I grabbed the shoulder of one of them, and it felt wrong. The arm didn't feel right. I backed off and swore. I looked closer, and the skin looked wrong. My guts were telling me to run, but I didn't want to think what the sheriff would call me. I headed to the barkeep, and he just stood there. He never moved. That smell came again. Not as strong as the others, but it was still there. When I looked at the barkeep, I saw something very wrong. His eyes were gone. No blood. It looked like hard candy. I ran. I forget my damn horse until I made it to the sheriff's office back home. The sheriff and the doctor arrived to investigate, and they found that all 263 inhabitants had undergone the same effect. The sheriff left the doctor to work. He autopsied all of the people, give the near identical results, only differing in volume due to the body size. The components of what the bodies were turned into will be listed below. The skin is tougher, similar to leather. There have been no damage to the skin, other than the fact it had been treated to make it tougher. The fatty tissue underneath is cooking fat that was cold and slightly solid. Muscle tissue has become candy floss. Cartilage is replaced with taffy, and the bones are dried sugar compacted into skeletal form. The lungs also appear to be a form of taffy as well. The organs below, where the diaphragm would be, is a meaty stew. The brain is caramelized popcorn. Over 250 people, all ages affected, and nobody can figure out why. The doctor, after conducting the autopsies, quit, and according to reports, left town whenever a travelling carnival arrives. Apart from the fact that the bodies were still recognisably human, given the transformed composition, there were no ambient sounds other than the wind. There were no flies, crickets, bees, wasps, or any other loud insect. No birds sang, no dogs or cats, just silence. The animals that were on the farms were missing. This was deeply unsettling to read, but while this village was in the United States, there have been 3 other townships in the Europe area, one in Great Britain, one in Germany, and the other in Romania. Russia even admitted it had happened to one of their townships, but that it was all they would officially say regarding this event. The 6th was actually in China, but again the reports are as detailed as an opposition ballot to Vladimir Putin. While there are other travelling carnivals or circuses who have unusual effects, this one, as far as I have read, is the most disturbing. Having tracked the majority of the carnivals at the time, via very old newspaper clippings and journal entries that could be retrieved. It is literally impossible for this carnival to exist, except it has struck 6 times that we know of, and this is all we know. The last report was a little over 40 years ago, and as much as the technology boom has dampened people's interest in going to the circus or carnival, but some older traditions are showing resurgence. God forbid this happens again, especially to a larger population centre. The Morticians seem to find this event reoccurring unlikely, and I do suspect that they may be right. I just wish I had more time to read over the military experiment files regarding the dogmen. That might make for easier reading, and there are so many other files for me to come through. Maybe I will read about a ghoul or something. Something to ease my mind would be highly appreciated. Fortunately for the person who named this incident is that they were already dead. If they weren't, they would be very shortly.
I am a deep web archivist. Case 13.
In truth, while I heard of the Jersey Devil as an urban legend, I never figured it to be much more than a flicker out of the corner of someone's eye, or a branch snapping in the woods. While I was always aware that this job would show me things I would not be ready to comprehend, I always thought that the presence of trolls and ogres would be more extreme. Then I started looking into the Jersey Devil. For those who have either started reading these case files now, or have asked for this particular cryptid to be archived, I will go over a brief rundown of this particular cryptid. The Jersey Devil. It is typically noted to be seen around southern New Jersey, hence the name. It is a small creature, about 3 to 4 feet tall, goat-shaped head, hooves and a small forearms, and leathery wings. One of the more reported features is its inhuman shrieking noise. It is also reported to be very fast. While there have been no confirmed deaths caused by this cryptid, observations by agents of the Morticians noted that the area that is said to be the domain of this cryptid is given a very wide berth by other cryptids. I do not blame them. I would rather get in an ass-kicking contest with an ogre than encounter this thing. There were reports of animal corpses that suffered wounds not usually associated with facial injuries. Since there was no verified witnesses to these attacks, it was assumed to be inflicted by a naturally occurring creature. Having seen monsters that could and would kill me, should they choose to, this seemed a harmless investigation to go through. I packed for the night hike, as I wasn't planning on staying in its territory too long. The drive to the area was long, and on arrival I checked into my motel and started on my hike. I had several days worth of food and had some research on local non-poisonous and non-toxic flora in the area. It was careful work getting off the beaten track, and I found a meagre area to set up camp. As I set my pack down, I felt a presence. It was enormous, like an extra weight trying to smother me. Whatever is capable of exuding this level of intensity was not a weak creature. Spinning around, I saw it, standing in the open and grinning at me. 3.5 feet tall, light brown fur. It held its belly and laughed. Well, that was the sensation it seemed to be emulating, but the sheer volume was like Barry White chuckling like Santa Claus, and it had a level of menace that not even the ogre exhibited. It raced past me and was gone by the time I turned around. I stood there shaking. It wasn't adrenaline. Exactly. It was fear. It is very rare for psychopaths to actually experience a strong enough emotion to generate an honest response. Fear was a common aspect when one did a combat tour, but that was muted. But compared to the sheer dread I felt when this cryptid laughed at me, it's like comparing the alcohol content of a light beer to absinthe. Soon the fear subsided, and I felt the obligation to try and stay out for one night. It was fast, and it had a laugh that I will always dread hearing again. But there wasn't much else I knew about it. I set up my tent, prepped a campfire, and waited for a while. As I watched, it appeared in my little camp area, its menacing grin still on its face. Then I felt the pressure. I have rarely had the displeasure of enduring a migraine, but this pressure within my skull was brutal. It just stared into me. Its focus was on my mind, and I could actually feel images form in my mind. It was disjointed, like a cutscene in a horror video game trying to be scary. Flashes of images, strobe-like effect on the images and screaming. It took me quite a while, but I realised it was telling me something about what it actually is. The first image was a think of Balrog, except double its height. Remove the fire from it and the wings are made of demon flesh, perpetually dripping blood. The arms look spikier. At seemingly random points along its arms are shards of bone that jut out. Its smile, in this form, is the most predatory, bloodlustful smile possibly across the known cryptids. Then, I saw a Bible, and the image shatters into dozens of pieces. Then in each shard the Bible is positioned to be in the centre of each one by reflection. The two images flickered back and forth, but I think I got the meaning because of the fragmented religions from that one holy book. The Jersey Devil cannot assume its proper form. The thing nodded. The migraine eased up considerably. Then more images appeared. This time, it is of the Jersey Devil, as it is described by others. But its shadow is that of its proper form. It walks through a firelight, bullets not affecting it, rockets, machine guns, tank shells, throwing daggers, swords, axes, nothing affected it. As I considered the church, it laughed again, and I saw it standing behind a pulpit, apparently giving a sermon. It would grab the bowl of holy water and splash itself in the face while smiling. When I thought of the word angel, the shattered Bible image appeared, and I immediately got the meaning. Fragmented religion, diminished beings of power. The migraine was almost gone, but it felt like there was a burr wedged into my skull. The mini-devil walked off and returned, dragging a large buck behind it with an almost contemptuous ease. It dropped it at my feet and pointed at it and me, twice. This was easy to figure out, so I started to prepare some meat. By the time I had finished, it returned, dragging a dead Wendigo. It was one of the most tense meals I have ever been in. I cooked my venison. It ate the Wendigo meat raw and stared at me the entire time. I glanced at the face of its meal. I am certain it looked horrified right before it died. After I ate my fill, it pointed at me, then in the direction of the motel. I started to pack up, and it growled. You know how people with the bass in their cars that can make long hair go nuts, or make people throw up due to the intensity of the vibrations? This was like the exact opposite of that. It was like my bones tried to push my muscles away with spikes for a second. I started to leave and glanced back. I saw its last image. At first it was someone cooking meat over a fire, but instead of me cooking the venison, it was cooking me. I ran out of the woods and sat in my room for an additional 2 nights. The only thing of observable note is that the other devil hunters heard a yipping in the woods. I heard that fucking laughter. Wow, hope you guys have enjoyed this series as much as I. So excited when I read through the first few chapters. I just had to fly through and get it recorded and uploaded. Again, huge thank you to the author Voidbearer2kn17. Do make sure you pop over to the Reddit page that I'll leave in the description below and hit a like there on that series. Of course, please do let me know down below what you thought, guys. As ever, please do like and share. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend, everybody, and are looking forward to an even better week ahead. Keep safe out there. And remember, if you go in a deep, dark woods, keep your eyes on your surroundings, especially in the trees. And remember, be safe, not sorry.